manufacturing strategy which actually transforms our enterprises, our production capacity, and so on and so forth. One of the loveliest things that I read in a long time is an issue of The Economist magazine, which is, I think, January 21st, 2012, this year, which it has a long report on what it calls state capitalism. And the title of the report is The Visible Hand, obviously, as a pun on Adam Smith's Invisible Hand in the Market. And it goes on to lament endlessly how all these emerging economies have these state companies, these national champions, which are becoming dominant not simply in different sectors of the economy, but in particular in the raw material and the commodity sector, and using that to transform their industries and the whole industrialization process on a global basis. Now, I am saying that the notion that there ought to be national champions, which is mentioned again, and I think again in passing, and not in as cogent and strategically relevant ways that it could be in the AMP, the notion of national champions is important, and that the sense in which we are taking control of these assets, looking at it in an integrated way. It's not simply about artisanal miners in some corner. It's not simply about everywhere. If you go to the United States, for example, only one street, Wall Street. That shows you how concentrated and centralized it is. If you go to London, is the same. City of London, 1 square mile, and it is the same with the kind of state-driven R&D that has taken place in all these sectors over a long time. When we look at economies such as the European Union and the United States and so on and so forth, or look at the purposes that the European Union seeks to advance this raw material strategy, it is quite explicit. It talks in terms of minerals to do and metals to do with specific areas of its work, aeronautics, construction, industry, high tech, and so on and so forth. And we have to remember that it is on the basis of those strategies that the European integration process started in the first place, through its steel agreements and so on. It is on the basis of that market leadership and industrial leadership in cutting-edge technological sectors has taken place. So that even without state ownership directly, the United States government and the region is the one who pushed McDonnell Douglas to be taken over by Boeing and consolidate an aeronautic industry which can be a global leader. In response to which the German and the French government, under the aegis of the European Union, also consolidated Airbus as its own counterpart, and so on and so forth. 2 seconds. So when we look at all these things, I'm saying that the notion of national champions and the notion of consolidating and monopolizing, nationalizing R&D ought to go together with the primacy of development finance in terms of public finance leading the way. When you look at some of the discussions about resource rents and so on, it turns it on its head. And unfortunately, the AMP repeats that. This is my final point. The AMP tends to repeat that. So it talks in terms of all the things that we have heard in many contexts, natural resource funds, and so on and so forth. But then it tries to domesticate the investment agenda by looking in the same way at the financialized markets, so that we should bring in pension funds, social insurance funds. So all these things actually begin to be part of the kind of financial markets through which mining transformation can raise the kind of investment that it requires. But the performance of sovereign wealth funds in the last, even as they become prominent in the last few years, should tell you that is not the way to go. Even in mighty China, whenever their sovereign wealth funds, some of their sovereign wealth funds have looked to buying financial assets as a bit which make money, like all these derivatives and so on, it has crashed. It has turned to ashes. But whenever, like the Abu Dhabi or other experiences and other sections of Chinese sovereign wealth fund, they have bought up production assets, they have diverted and oriented on developing new lines of production and so on and so forth. That is the basis of the kind of transformation that takes place. And that cannot be left to the free market, that cannot be left to free trade, that cannot be left to liberalized investment and so on and so forth. And it's on that basis too that we can have a strategy for consolidating the national and the regional levels of integration. I hope we can talk about some of those things in the discussion. But of course, we have to end from where we are now. where we are now, some of the threats are the EPs. We have to say no to them. And in terms of the WTO, I think we should send it back to request. Thank you.